Well, hi, everybody, and welcome to episode 97 of Circle of Fellows. This is a monthly conversation featuring a panel of fellows of the International Association of Business Communicators, IABC, on a topic of interest to folks working in the world of organizational communication. I am your moderator, Shel Holtz. I am an IABC fellow, a certified strategic communication management professional, and Senior Director of Communications at Webcor. We are a commercial general contractor and builder working throughout California and headquartered in the San Francisco Bay Area, which is where I'm coming to you from this morning. And we have a truly global panel to talk about global diversity initiatives. And I'd like you each to introduce yourselves, starting with Rajiv.
Hello, everybody. Good morning. I'm Rajiv Kumar from Mumbai, India, and I am an independent communication consultant here. And I teach in various management institutes the subject of communication. And I have been an IIBC member for over 2 decades now. And it's a pleasure to be part of this discussion this morning. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us, Rajiv. I know it's late there in Mumbai. Priya.
Hello, I'm Freya Bates. I own Inner Strength Communication based in Toronto, Canada, and I'm really excited about this conversation, especially since I know, Shel, you know that I just wrote a book on building a culture of inclusivity and focused on internal communications in diversity, equity, and inclusion.
It's an excellent book. I would recommend it to anybody. And congratulations on the publication of that, Priya.
Thank you.
Neil.
Hi, everybody. Neil Griffiths. I'm coming to you from the UK. In my day job, I am Global and European DEI Director for Kearney, which is a management consulting firm. And in my volunteer life, lots of IABC activities and helping to support the DEI agenda and the communication agenda as well. Pleased to be here. Looking forward to it.
Great to see you, Neil. Letty. You're muted, Letty. I got you. You're
Okay. Hi, good morning. I'm Letty Narvaez. I am Mexican. I'm based in Mexico City. And I have my own company focused on offering a variety of communication services in all the Latin American region on strategic and employee communications, reputation and crisis management, diversity and inclusion, and training. And I am very excited to participate in this circle, especially because for the last 20 years, I have been passionate about promoting the advancement of women and gender equality. I'm one of the founders of the Mexican Association of Women Executives. So I'm very excited to participate.
And we're very glad to have you here, Letty. This could not be more timely for me, as I was mentioning to all of you before we started recording. This is Construction Inclusion Week in the construction industry throughout the United States. Every day has a theme, and we have been very actively involved in helping to promote this and communicate it in the communications department. Yesterday's theme was supplier diversity, which is not, I think, a category of diversity that a lot of people give much thought to. But we had a lunch and learn about how to bring diverse suppliers into our projects. And this could be a local business enterprise. It could be a women-owned business enterprise. It could be an LGBTQ plus enterprise. It could be a veterans enterprise, minority owned, disabled veterans. There's a long list of these. And again, I don't think that this is a category of diversity a lot of people think of. So I'd like to start off by considering how we define diversity, and particularly how do we define it across cultures and regions, because it probably doesn't mean the same thing every place.
Absolutely. Yeah, I don't mind starting, Shell. One of the things we talk about in the book is when we start with diversity, we start with representation. So, especially when we're talking about around the world, what does representation look like? Representation amongst your clients and your customers, your people at the front line of your organization, and that could include suppliers as well, and the communities in which you do business. So really thinking about, do you and your organization, the people who work for you, the leaders in your organization, represent the folks that are out there that you're doing business with all the time?
And I would also like to mention that there are some differences between diversity, equity, and inclusion. And they are often grouped together because they are interconnected, and it is only a combination that their true impact emerges. Diversity for me refers to who is represented in the workforce, referring to the organization. Like some examples of diversity are like gender diversity, age diversity, ethnic diversity, physical ability, and neurodiversity. But also, it's important to emphasize that there's diversity on how people think. So we should differentiate diversity versus equity and versus inclusion, which inclusion refers to how the workforce experiences the workplace and the degree to which organizations embrace all employees and enable them to make meaningful contributions.
Yeah, I would put it in a little different way. I think it's a bouquet of humanity. Primarily, you just don't use any lens through which you view people or representations. You just see them as a whole homogeneous humanity. And it's like you go into a garden which is full of flowers, you have different varieties. And that's what diversity is, that you enjoy the varieties of human beings that are there in the world, irrespective of any other differentiation.
I think that's a really good point. And I think now we have a sort of a tendency to think about diversity in terms of protected characteristics. And certainly that's a part of it. But I think, my peers on the panel are absolutely right. It's about a whole host of things. And that might differ from organization to organization. And I don't think there's any one single definition of what diversity is. And I think that's appropriate because it is very contextual. I will pick up on the supply diversity piece, Shell. You're absolutely right. It's not that well known and that well covered, but yet I think it's McKinsey that estimates that up to 2/3 of your impact with regards to DEI as an organization occurs in your supply chain. So it's an underserved aspect, but actually an area that can have quite a bit of impact on your DEI performance and maturity.
Well, that leads to a question or a challenge that I think a lot of organizations would face. And that is, and in particular for global organizations or multinational organizations, how can they be sure that they're respecting local interpretations of diversity while still maintaining a global stance?
I'm going to jump in on this one because speaking of Priya's book, it reminds me of something that's in there, which is the why. Starting with what's the why of DEI, and having that solid understanding of what this is all about for the organization. I think that's the starting point, and that's how you overcome that hurdle of difference of interpretation, difference of definition, because it really is about what it's doing for the organization. And I think if you can center on that, then you can almost kind of block out, I guess, the challenge of, well, what does this mean and how do we interpret it, and what are the different definitions that we need to be thinking about? The why is really important.
And I also believe that the role of communication is quite important in this area, because the communicator can interpret and understand the culture, the local culture, and then transfer this everything that is communicated and the policies about diversity in the organization to shape it to the culture and of the local culture, even if there is a global diversity policy. So the role of us as communicators is quite important, as to communicate these and to train the leaders so that there is it's an homogeneous communication around diversity and inclusion.
And it's been interesting, when you follow some of the conversations around diversity online, a little bit of, conversation and chatter has been increasing about it shouldn't be about the business case. It should only be because it's the right thing to do. And I tend to disagree with that I think of, DEI and some of the changes that are happening in our organization as one of the biggest transformations that we're going through that impacts everyone. And that it really is that we need to ground our organizations in the why, as Neil said. It's nice to have him quote from the book, but it really is grounding, that we need to understand our values. We need to understand our strategies. We need to understand our why from a DEI perspective in order to create those connections, in order to drive the changes.
Of course, both things can be true, right, Priya? I mean, it can be the right thing to do and support a business case. When introducing Construction Inclusion Week this week, our CEO made the point that there is a labor shortage in construction. And if we want to continue to have enough people to do what we do, we had better expand the scope of where we are recruiting from and who we are bringing into this industry.
Great example of the why. I mean, that's a great illustration of one of the whys for an organization right there. And, I think one thing I will say on the business case for DEI, where I agree that we need to move beyond that, is where if you find yourself in a situation where you're almost asking for permission, right? That you feel that you need a business case in order to be focused on it. I think that we should move beyond that. And, rewind a few years, I wish I'd have been focusing on value creation versus can we please focus on this, right? Because I think when you shift the conversation towards what value does this add, going back to the why thing again, it's a different kind of conversation that you can have with leaders and with employees and your external stakeholders as well.
One thing. Oh, go ahead, Rajiv.
No, I was just reminded of the common phrase of think global and act local, and it applies to communication in a big way, because the context of communication changes with every country, with every region, and so communicators have to be well versed with the local culture, local ways of doing things. And one of the best tactics that I have observed in using communication is to use metaphors in language which actually resonate with the local people, based on their beliefs and their culture. If you use metaphors which resonate with them, it carries the meaning in a much more effective way. Coming to your other point about how we have diversity in suppliers, one case comes to my mind about Delta Airlines in 2020, when this George Floyd case came up. Uh, the CEO was Bastian, I think Bastian
Ed
of
Bastian.
Delta Airlines. Yeah. So he declared that he would be part of a 110 coalition, which was formed, which basically pledged to hire 1 million black people over the next 10 years, and based on their skills, and not they need not have degrees. The idea was to bring them into the employment bracket, and so that they could sustain their families. That kind of initiative is an excellent initiative based on circumstances as they appear. And I think your company also probably is looking at from that angle on how to bring in unrepresented communities into the employment force.
The idea of justifying DEI, the why, is it more valid when we look at outcomes? I mean, there is a mountain of data that says that, for example, organizations that have 2 or more women on their board perform better, that organizations that have diversity on their executive teams outperform those that don't, that teams that are diverse generate better ideas and raise issues that don't necessarily emerge in homogenous teams that produce better results for the organization. Are these more convincing types of whys than some of the others that might be presented in order to convince people that we should be doing this?
Well, there are some other benefits that I think we should be aware of and also foster them within the organization. Benefits of including DEI, like winning talent, for example, in the organizations, improving the quality of decision making that you just mentioned within the teams, increasing customer insight and innovation, because diverse teams are typically more innovative and better at anticipating shifts, driving employee motivation and satisfaction, and also improving a company's global image and license to operate. So, because companies that can maintain or increase their focus on inclusion and diversity during crisis, for example, are poised to avoid consequences such as struggling to attract talent or losing customers and government support. So I think that's something that we should be aware of also.
One issue that has come up where I work is that inclusion is a form of psychological safety. And these are 2 ideas that we don't often hear conflated. But people who don't feel included don't feel psychologically safe. And psychological safety is a requirement to be able to bring your whole self to work and contribute and raise your hand and not be afraid to point out problems or issues or challenges or even contribute ideas. Should we be including psychological safety in the diversity discussion?
Definitely. I mean, that's the whole point of inclusion, is that you offer psychological safety to the employees. And at the bottom of it all is the issue of dignity at the workplace, dignity and respect. Ultimately, what you want to make every employee feel that they are respected, regarded, and valued member of the workforce, and that provides him dignity within the work that he is doing, and he also gets a certain sense of respect from the public for what work he is doing. He enjoys the work that he is doing, and he gains a lot of recognition for that. So it increases a sense of belonging, and he knows that the employer will take care of him, and that gives a lot of psychological safety. That definitely makes it very, very inclusive.
Yes, I agree with you. I believe that there are many elements which we need to introduce, and some of them are like protective mechanisms, and psychological safety would be one of them. Connection opportunities, meritocracy, resource accessibility, work-life support. For example, promote among peers and teammates mutual respect, idea integration, peer respect. All those, I believe, are part of some protective mechanisms that the organization can promote within the workforce.
Absolutely. And you think, psychological safety, what's the quote? People don't remember what you said or did, but they remember how you made them feel.
Yes.
And psychological safety is about that feeling, right? It's about belonging. It's about being able to show up with all of yourself and your experiences and being valued for that. And that means a lot in terms of being connected to productivity and contribution and innovation. It's really being able to show up safely and contribute in the way that you know you can.
And Gartner's done a lot of research on this, right? And looked at high-performing organizations from an inclusion perspective, and psychological safety is one of their drivers, alongside fair treatment, alongside collaborative decision-making, integrating difference. So there's even more research that's pointing to the need for this. And, for me, it's as simple as, if I don't think that people around me embrace me as who I am, if I think that there are people who have got questions about my way of life, then I'm going to be distracted by that, right? That's going to take my energy away from me doing my best work. So absolutely, psychological safety is a massive factor.
How important are employee resource groups in promoting diversity in organizations?
I'd be interested, Neil. I'm sure I heard this laugh about that. I know that the conversation with the ERGs that we're hearing from folks, and I'm from the outside looking in, is the questioning around the role of the ERGs and how much extra pressure is being put on those marginalized groups to actually solve the problems for themselves. And are they actually being taken away, especially those leaders, are they being taken away from the projects that may promote them in the organization? So we're hearing a lot of chatter about that. Are the ERGs going away? Probably not. Do they, appreciate having the chance to connect with one another? Absolutely. But there is that pressure and those questions about, is this distracting me from actually getting ahead, or am I actually contributing? And are we getting the voice of the ear of the leaders who are going to make the differences?
Is that contingent then on the charter of the ERG and the framework that the organization puts in place for ERGs to be established?
My experience says yes, Shell. It really is about clarity of purpose, clarity of roles and responsibilities, to address a lot of what Priya was just talking about. Where do they fit in the overall DEI structure within an organization, and what purpose does it serve, right? And there is this shift in some cases from ERG to BRG, so business resource groups, where actually those communities are contributing to a particular area of business growth because they bring a unique perspective either to a product or service development or some other kind of business challenge. So it's all in the definition, and the success is really all about how well you articulate many of those aspects.
Where I work, we have several ERGs. One is the Collective, which is the Black Employees ERG. And they recently, I think it was 6 of them, went to Atlanta for our very first recruiting trip to historically Black colleges and universities. And they were the staff at our booth at a job fair for 3 of those. I think it was Spelman College, Clark Atlanta, and I'm zoning out on the 3rd one. But they were thrilled. They were excited to have been involved with that. I don't know if you see that as a positive role for an ERG to participate in.
Yeah, I think so. And obviously, it's going to depend on the individuals. I agree with Priya's earlier point about putting the burden of work on the underrepresented groups. But I think, in my experience, people who have gone from an ERG to a recruiting event are very comfortable and confident about representing the organization and showing people, potential recruits, that there is a place for them within the organization, and they are welcomed. Yeah. We do it, for instance, with the LGBTQ plus community as well. We run what we call our Proud Academy, and that's where we invite members of the LGBTQ plus community to an event, sort of a getting to know the business event, and get them energized and interested in applying.
A lot of organizations might say, look, we have ERGs, we have X% of underrepresented classes on our executive team. We have put X number of employees through training. We've ticked off all the boxes. When in truth, there are people who are still feeling that they are not included in the organization. Who should be accountable for ensuring that these efforts are authentic?
See, in this kind of scenario where you're ticking off all the boxes, but in reality, you see, awareness, it shows that there is awareness of the issue, but what actions have been taken? You have to look at what is the manner in which people are looking at this topic of inclusion and diversity. See, in all of us, there is an implicit bias or unconscious bias we all have because of our upbringing, because of our education or the culture we are brought up in. And this recognition of the implicit bias is the most important thing in embedding a culture which promotes diversity and inclusion. One company called Mars Pet Care, I think, if I'm not wrong, yeah, went through a process of changing the mindsets of its employees. What they did was they did research, and they made every leader do an introspection in a scientific way to understand his or her biases at work. And with that kind of realization, the they did it with about 3,000 leaders across the globe, and they found that that kind of research was very effective. It was very effective for the leaders themselves to know what biases they are operating from, and they became very conscious, and then they were told how they can mitigate that bias in their daily work, and how to deal with employees, and how to remove that bias in their thinking. So what we need is a change in mindset. You may fill up the boxes, tick off the boxes, fill the numbers, and show that you have got a very diverse workforce. But as long as the mindset has not changed, there is no real cultural change within the company, and that's very detrimental to its growth.
Absolutely. And I'd probably also say that, I think there was a study, I can't remember who the source was, but they interviewed CEOs, 500 CEOs, about what were their primary challenges that they were going to look for 2024. I think it was Mark Crowley who shared it on X. And what they said was the number one issue was retention. And I think that's what we're starting to pay attention to from a diversity, the check the box process, which is how many of those folks that are being brought in to those organizations are actually being successful and staying. And I think the number's higher than most people would like.
Yes, and there are some other factors that some employees have mentioned that for them it's important so they can feel included. Like if there's a diverse and inclusive leadership, for example, the presence of diverse leaders at the organization, as well as an organization focused on inclusive leadership, meritocracy, for example, and initiatives to increase fairness in performance evaluation, sponsorship. Respondents who say colleagues at their organizations have gone out of their way to create professional advancement opportunities for them are also more likely than others to feel a strong sense of inclusion, and also substantive access to senior leaders. When there is a meaningful interaction with senior leaders, and this helps the career advancement, all those are some factors that promote and help people to perceive that there is inclusion within the company.
I think, Michelle, before I would just dive in on that one a little bit, because again, I think it relates back to that whole why aspect again. If you're only doing it to tick the boxes and you really only care about, performative measures, it's going to be really easy to see through it. And I think stakeholders, internal and external, have got such a low tolerance for that these days that you stand a considerable risk of losing employees, losing clients and customers, losing investors even increasingly. And I know it's certainly true of organizations I've worked in that you can't qualify for business and mandates and projects unless you can demonstrate genuine performance on this. So I'm not sure anybody that is ticking boxes anymore is going to be very relevant to those internal and external stakeholders over time.
Yeah, I have to tell you that in construction, we're seeing more and more RFPs requiring diversity. We have projects where there are literally quotas for the percentage of local business enterprises and other XBEs that have to be part of the project, which we try to exceed. And we're also trying to reach targets that we set for ourselves on projects that don't have those mandated by the client. But what other kinds of KPIs might serve an organization in striving for diversity? I mean, Priya, you mentioned retention, and certainly trying to retain underrepresented classes of employees would be important, especially if you see that they're among the group that's leaving most frequently. But I mean, are KPIs important? And which ones would organizations look at?
Absolutely. I mean, recruitment is a big issue on the minds of leaders as well, especially as we see demographic shifts, because a lot of the data also says that Gen Z who's coming into the workplace is very socially conscious and expect that of the organizations. They're looking for diversity inclusion. They're looking for, ESG KPIs, and that's a big process where you measure. One of the tools that I highlight is the GDEIB standards, the Global Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Benchmarks. And they actually have a checklist that you can download for free. There's materials for free if you look up GDEIB, and they could go through KPIs that are across organizations that you can actually focus on, from foundational knowledge to internal and external execution. It's really a fascinating checklist. I just discovered it while we were writing the book, so it was a pleasant surprise.
I've been using that model for a number of years, Priya. It is really, really helpful, actually. And what it does is that it helps you plot your organizational maturity, because it doesn't just look at, do I have a target? Do I have a DEI person in the organization? It really cuts across the entire operation, from visioning and leadership through learning, communication, sustainability, marketing, supplier diversity. So it really shows the breadth of what this really is in an organization. So and we've used that to map maturity in a couple of organizations I've worked in now. So it's a really useful model. I think for me, what I'm really interested in, and it links back to your previous question as well, Shell, is whether or not people are actually feeling it. Because you can be investing millions in inclusion and DEI initiatives, but unless people are really feeling it in their everyday, I don't know that it really adds up to that much. So I would be seeking KPIs that really demonstrate if we're actually living this authentically. And that could be inclusion scores or qualitative. I don't think we lean on qualitative data enough at all in this space, because it's really the lived experience inside of organizations, or as your interactions with clients and customers, that is the real indicator here as to whether or not you're getting this right.
I want to come back to that feeling it notion, Neil, in just a second. But first, since we're a little more than halfway through the session, I do want to let everyone who's watching live know that you can submit your own question or share your own comment, observation, or experience. You're watching on YouTube, and there is a text field that you can submit that through, and we would be happy to address your question or comment. But in terms of feeling it, Neil. I know that there are organizations out there where the leaders are invested in this. They have set KPIs, perhaps even achieved those KPIs or some of them, and yet employees still aren't feeling it. I don't want to narrow this down to what are they doing wrong, but what do leaders do next when they find themselves in that particular quandary?
I think
I would.
one of the yeah,
Can I?
sorry.
Sorry, I'll just jump in because I would go right back to something that Letty said earlier. It's about communication. Communication. People are very busy. They don't have the time to connect dot A with dot B. And so the communication around your DEI efforts is paramount here to help people understand that they are actually feeling these things because of a DEI driver. Sorry, Rajiv. Sorry, Letty.
No, it's perfectly fine. Very good points Neil has made. What I would say is that if I were to choose one thing that would show me the efficacy of the DNI initiatives would be to measure how much trusting relationships have developed within the organization. So I would measure the level of trust within the hierarchy, doing a kind of a 360 degrees assessment on how much you trust your superior, how much you trust your peers, how much you trust your subordinate. If I can get a measure of trusting relationships increasing within the organization, that's a very good sign of bonding, a very good sign of inclusion in the company.
Yes, and another area that could show also the level of inclusion is employee engagement. Employee engagement is strongly linked with the sense of inclusion. Those who really feel very included are more likely than others to say they really feel excited and committed to their organization. And I believe this takes us to ask something that aligned to what Shell was asking, because there have been some studies in which mention that some corporate leaders are in a quandary, in a dilemma, because they feel that in spite of having invested a reasonable amount of resources to promote DEI, they haven't seen a real change and they are uncertain on what to do next. So aligned to what Neil was saying, which must be the role of the organization and communication in order to foster more tangible results.
And remember that when we talk about feelings, we should be able to, like, back to some of those questions from an engagement perspective. ENPS, would you recommend this place to work? Would you bring your friends to work in this organization? How are we connecting the dots from a communication perspective to let them know what we've done and why, and bringing all that together? And then remembering that, I don't know, as an internal communication professional, not everyone's going to feel it at the same time. There are lots of challenges. There's external pressures. There's lots of conversations that are going on a number of issues right now, where it feels like it's almost too much some days. People are overwhelmed. So we need to realize, let's focus on what we're going to change. Let's close the loops and then address the issues. But we need to keep the conversations happening.
I heard a great line last week. I was at a conference on mental health, and somebody said, "Feelings are data," and I love that. And I think we need to pay much more attention to how people are feeling as a concrete data point, and it would certainly illustrate inclusion, I think.
Yeah, that means more listening. Listening is important to feelings.
Yeah.
I don't know how we have this conversation without addressing some of the controversy that's cropped up in the past couple of years. Considering the business outcomes we see from diverse organizations, diverse boards, diverse leadership, I don't know how this became political exactly, but it has. And I know that this is a bigger deal in the U.S., and I'm the only American on the panel. But there are efforts underway. Some of them have been successful to eliminate DEI. Particularly in schools. DEI offices in schools in Florida and Texas have been closed. There are political commentators on the right who are preaching the evils of DEI and the inequities inherent in it, they claim. We did recently see Rishi Sunak, the Prime Minister of the UK, say that a man is a man and a woman is a woman, which is a direct assault on trans rights. The National Hockey League, which has teams in Canada, Priya, has banned the use of pride tape on hockey sticks. And they made a point that I hear from a lot of organizations that we shouldn't be taking political stands. For a while, we were hearing that organizations need to be purposeful. And Priya, you mentioned the Gen Z or Gen Z, the Zoomers, and they're definitely looking for purposeful organizations to work for, to buy from, to invest in. And yet there's an assault on DEI. How do you circle that square? How do you promote what you know is not only right, but profitable in the face of mounting opposition and pressure?
I think some of it comes to starting with your values and who are you? Being a little introspective as an organization. Who are we? What do we represent? How does that show up for our customers, our communities, and our colleagues? And I think a lot of the global organizations are there. They're taking stands because they have to, because that's who they're speaking on behalf of both their foundations, but also their strategies and the people that they do business with around the world. And I think that's a really good place to start in terms of that. And I think that some of these conversations are meant to divide and meant to stop things. They're meant to drive emotions, those feelings we talk about, the anger, the guilt, the shame. And I think that really we need to figure out how to unify, how to bring people together, because I think we're better for it.
Even a lot of the book bans are based on these issues.
Mm-hmm.
Issues.
Absolutely.
I just want to reinforce what Priya just said. I mean, when I encounter these challenges internally, the guiding principle is always the values. This is what we stand for as an organization, regardless of what your personal beliefs are. And in some cases, you have to kind of check those at the door when you come and work for us, because as an organization, this is what we represent, this is what we stand for, and this is what we expect. DEI in and of itself is not political, but as you rightly said, Shell, it has been politicized. And that's just given legitimacy to people who perhaps are tired of it, that they don't really want to do it, and so therefore they label it with a political badge in order to justify being able to discredit or discount it. So I think we're facing a big headwind, and it will be the organizations who genuinely care about this that will emerge still caring about it.
And will win because they care about it.
And will win, right. Yeah, good point.
And it's a challenge to, it's a big decision to whether the organization should take a stance or not. It's a difficult decision. And one of the things that you have to see is that if you're taking a stance, then you should not be living in a glass house yourself. It should not be, if you are following the same stance very, very rigorously, then your credibility increases and you take a stance on a certain issue. But if you're found wanting in implementation within your own organization, that acts as a great handicap in taking any socio-political stance. That is one. And I think many other times you'll find stances are not taken in time because communicators are not ready for it, in the sense that, like we have crisis communication protocols. We kind of imagine what crisis and what should I do in that crisis. I don't think this kind of crises are planned for. And there must be a kind of a study done on what kind of issues can emerge in the political, socio-political landscape of a country. And there must be some kind of communication planning done well in advance on how should we take the decision and how will we go about it, If that planning can be done, it will be very useful for communicators.
Yeah, on that broader issue of purpose and the challenge of taking a stand on a societal issue, which, by the way, the Edelman Trust Barometer for years has been saying that the public expects business to address societal issues because they no longer have faith in government, media, or NGOs to tackle those issues. And business is the only one that's above water on trust among those four categories of institutions. The answer seems to be around alignment, right? I mean, how does this align with your business? It makes sense for Patagonia to take on sustainability as its purpose. How does it make sense for leaders to find alignment? I mean, the values that the company has espoused is certainly one of those ways, but in what other ways might organizations find alignment between their core mission, their strategic plan, their values to promote diversity?
I think somebody mentioned trust, right? And trust is about alignment. It's about your actions speaking louder than your words, and people are looking for that connection. So earlier, because Canada's hockey, and the reason I brought up the pride issue was that they have recently, last year, had created a whole campaign about hockey is for everyone. And that's what people are using in the press when they're talking about their recent stance, that if hockey is for everyone, why are you keeping people from expressing their beliefs and proving that hockey is for everyone? So it's that disconnect that's creating the issues. So it's really thinking about where are those connections formed in your organization that actually through actions demonstrate what you stand for.
Priya, are people accusing the NHL of purpose washing by putting out this statement but not walking the talk?
Absolutely, and it's a number of issues with the NHL, right? Okay. It's anti-Black racism. It's a lot of things when they created that hockey is for everyone campaign, but now people are saying, is that just a campaign? Can we trust them?
We have a question from the listeners. This is from Brian Kilgore, who I believe is there in Toronto with you, Priya. Should job application forms require color info, nationality info? For example, a Trinidad person may also be a Chinese person. Religious information, which may or may not be observed. What do you think? I know it's kind of an HR issue for a bunch of communicators, but
I don't see anything wrong with it. With seeking information, the point is that seeking information is okay. But what you do with that information is important. Suppose a company wants to ensure, employment from a certain region and a certain area, so that kind of information can be used correctly. If I know that there is somebody at Trinidad, I want to employ people from Trinidad, and you tell me you're from Trinidad, I can put you on the first priority. So that kind of information is useful to the employer. Only the way it is used, the data, how data is used and for what purpose makes it different. So I don't think at first instance you should be scared or worried about why they are asking me that information.
Yes, I believe, yes, as you just mentioned, that it's not only the job application, but for example, also the job interviews. There are some companies that during the interview, they even ask you personal questions, and then the person really perceives that information will impact the decision at the end, as if you are planning to have children very soon, if you are married or not, or maybe sexual orientation or some other things that, as Rahib mentioned, it's not only the information that they ask, but the way they use it for the final decisions that are taken.
I know that, especially since I've been trying to increase the number of speakers on conferences to be a little bit more diverse, and I run a conference myself, I started adding a question to my speaker application, just saying, we're committed to ensuring there's diverse speakers, which tell us that you represent these groups so that we can make sure that we're taking that into consideration when we're creating our speaker panel. That being said, what I have seen is not necessarily, things on job applications themselves, but like you mentioned, Shell, people showing up in places where they can find those individuals who can fill in the gaps, changing the way the job description is created so that it allows more people to apply for that job that don't necessarily meet the limited criteria that only a certain group will fit into. So we're starting to see that kind of information. From a self-identification perspective, I actually encourage organizations to then ask the self-identification questions at orientation once they've hired the employee, just to have that data available in order to drive the data that they need in order to, because it tends to be a little harder for them to get that self-identification right now.
We have a diversity dashboard where any employee can go and see. They can slice. It's Power BI, so they can slice and dice it any way they like. And we wouldn't be able to offer that dashboard if we didn't have that data. So, of course,
but I guess there's something in the word shall require. But my answer to that is probably no, because every form of that nature should have the I choose not to declare option, right? This is about choice. I agree with all of my colleagues' remarks about how useful this information is for monitoring and tracking. And I would also add, in most locations that I'm aware of, it's unlawful to make any kind of decision, whether that's hiring or other, on the grounds of what makes somebody who they are and their characteristics. So, any organization that's using that information to influence the decision is probably on the wrong side of the law.
Well, I wasn't going to go here, but as long as you raised that issue, Neil, one of the pushbacks that I have heard against diversity and against collecting this information is, shouldn't it all just be about merit?
Well, first of all, that's a myth.
Please.
I can't remember the name of the piece now, but it's something like the paradox of meritocracy or something like that. But it's
tyranny of meritocracy. I've seen
tyranny. That. Yeah, the tyranny. Yeah, something like that. Which is the argument that no system is truly meritocratic, and in fact, if you lean too heavily on meritocracy, you actually make the situation worse and create feelings of resentment, actually, from those who get through the system, interestingly. So I've got slightly distracted by my point there. What was the question, Shell? Because I will get back to my point.
Just about the pushback that merit should be the driver for hiring decisions, absent any criteria.
Yeah, it's about qualification than merit, I would say. Who is the best person for this role? Priya is absolutely right. There are ways and means of expanding one's definition of what good is and what the best person is for a particular role, and the extent to which you can focus on essential competencies and essential experience versus arbitrary requirements like a degree from a given college or however many years at a given level in an organization, which we know are typically occupied by a certain kind of someone. The more that we can focus on what really makes them able to do the job, I think we will be much better positioned to increase the diversity that exists in the potential candidate pool.
Yes, and I believe we should reinforce just the fact that maybe we haven't mentioned it obviously, but there must be a policy on DEI, and there must be coherence about what that the leaders really act accordingly to this policy. So everybody within the company says that there's alignment. Even, for example, during a crisis when leaders might be tempted to shelve DEI efforts to ensure the company's financial survival, there is value to prioritizing DEI because it's also good business. It doesn't have to be at the expense of financial outcomes. This isn't an issue where leaders can say we cannot do diversity right now because we are under a lot of pressure or we don't have budget. Diversity is one of the things that you've got to be mindful of in every context and in every moment or situation.
Well, we only have a couple of minutes left, and because I'm moderating this panel, I get to ask a technology question. Several years ago, Microsoft released an AI chatbot to Twitter called Tay, and it was trained on all the conversations that were going on, including all of the racism and xenophobia and hate, and very quickly started spewing that. And Microsoft withdrew it fairly quickly, called it a great learning experience. Now we have ChatGPT and Claude and Bard and a host of others emerging that are populating their large language models by scraping pretty much everything that they can get freely off of the web, including bias, which has been showing up in the results. And for those people who are not carefully scrubbing what is being produced by these chatbots and copying and pasting and sending it to employees, incorporating it in press releases, putting it in content marketing, that bias reflects on the organization. I'm interested in your views on the bias that seems to be currently inherent in these AI models.
Well, wasn't it, I don't know what it was, but somebody said, show me what a CEO looks like. And it ended up being a white male who was like 6'4". Like it was, they even specified the height. I think that's, and they did something recently with Barbie as well. I think what you realize is that that AI learns from what's out there and brings those biases with you, and you need to have that lens when you're using it. So I think, there's some really promising opportunities with AI to use it in the work that we're doing, but you need to just don't take it at face value. You need to make sure that you're using your critical thinking.
I agree. The Barbie one, Priya, is a really great illustration of how this works. And if you haven't seen it, I think the prompt was, show me what Barbie looks like in, fill the blank country name. And it was all stereotype images that came back. Quite remarkable in some cases, I would say. But yeah, anyone that's punching anything into a generative tool and then not evaluating the output and critically evaluating the output is making a big mistake, I think.
Yeah, I personally believe that one of the roles of communication is to influence the workflows into which AI is incorporated, so that the people in the organization who are using it know that if I'm using it here, I have to add this step. So it just becomes a matter of the way the workflow works, and people aren't just, I think I'll use AI for this, and then risking that kind of output. This has been a great discussion. Obviously could go on much longer. I have several questions on my sheet here that I haven't asked yet, but we are just about out of time. I have enough time left to let everybody know what's coming up in the next Circle of Fellows, which is scheduled for Thursday, November 16th at 5 p.m. Eastern Time. The topic here is the gift of communication. This is a first-time topic for Circle of Fellows. For those of you who don't know gift of communication, this is all about communicators volunteering their time to nonprofits who don't have the budget or the resources to do much or any communication for themselves. This is something we do annually at the IABC World Conference on a day before the conference. They find local nonprofits that could use the help, and people who are coming to conference volunteer. But it's something anybody can do at any time. It could be at an IABC chapter level or just as an individual. And we're going to talk about volunteering communication time to nonprofits during this hour. And the panelists will be Ginger Homan, Robin McCaslin, Marianne McCauley, and Barbara Puffer. It will be a really great panel. I also have just enough time to thank Anna Willie for all of her spectacular effort in assembling these panels, determining the topics, scheduling so that it works with everybody's time zones. These would not happen without Anna's help. So until next month, November 16th at 5 p.m. Eastern, that'll be a wrap for this Circle of Fellows. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, Shell. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Bye.